Have you ever wondered about the world beyond our planet? What would happen if we suddenly lost gravity on Earth? Sometimes it seems like gravity is such an inconvenient thing to exist. Like, for example, whenever I'm trying to pick up a heavy object from the floor, I have to bend down and try really hard to resist the force of gravity and pull that object up. But it seems like without gravity, I can just pull the object up a little and it'll just float up to my hands and I can push it somewhere else. Or whenever I'm trying to get to school really fast, I sprint as hard as I can, resisting the force of gravity to get to school really fast. But it seems like without gravity, I can just push off of some object and I'll just float my way to school. So what if we didn't have gravity on Earth? Not having gravity is probably not as fun as you would imagine. The first thing that you'll notice without gravity is that you'll feel weightless. It's almost like you're constantly falling, but there's just simply no gravity. And then you'll notice that the objects around you might start to float. Well, if they're kept relatively still, then they won't move at all due to Newton's first law. But if you touch an object just a little, then it'll drift off to somewhere else. And the first trouble comes when you try to get to another place. You can't walk on the floor because there's no gravity, obviously, so you have to push other objects to get to other places. But once you push one object, then that object will move off to somewhere else and maybe collide with another object, and that object will move and collide with your desk, and your desk will move, and everything will just be a mess. And without gravity, and probably the hardest thing for me is that you can't go on amusement rides anymore. Roller coasters, they won't function the same way without gravity. They'll just float off instead of going up and down the hills like how they're supposed to with gravity. Or bungee jumping. I've always wanted to go to bungee jumping, but without gravity, I'll just float off the cliff. Or for airplane pilots, if you've loved riding on airplanes or watching movies involving jets, those airplanes, and unfortunately for the airplane pilot, without gravity to keep them to Earth's orbit, they'll simply just fly off to space. But all of those described and a lot of other consequences are all pretty easy to deal with. I mean, I can go without amusement rides and still live. I can be weightless and still be normally eating food, sleeping, and doing all that. But after a while, things begin to become life-threatening. You see, without gravity, there's nothing to keep all the essential things like water and gas on Earth. There's no way to contain those things. And so, for gas and water that's near the equator, which is spinning very, very fast, they'll feel a centrifugal force pulling them up. And so that means that after a while, the water and gas from Earth will leave Earth and go to outer space. What does that mean? Well, without water, first of all, we can't survive. But also, perhaps more tragically, we no longer have atmospheric pressure. Okay, and what's the big deal with this atmospheric pressure anyways? Well, atmospheric pressure is essentially just air molecules crushing down on you due to gravity. And there's lots and lots of air molecules crushing down on you. So even though they're really light, they exert an immense force on your body. In fact, we experience an average of 15 pounds of force per square inch on our body. That's like having a car crushing on top of you at the same time and constantly. And the reason that we don't feel this force is that our body is already adapted to feeling this force constantly. So that means that there's pressure within our body also pushing out, resisting this force. And so since the pressure balances, we feel no force on our body overall. But the story is different without this atmospheric pressure. You see, since our body is already adapted to this atmospheric pressure, that means that if the pressure were suddenly to be removed, we'd feel like we're about to explode. And you can imagine that because our body is already having so much pressure pushing outwards, resisting this original atmospheric pressure, that if we take it away, this pressure will continue to pull and we would feel like that we're about to explode from the inside. And the most notable effect that you'll feel is probably your ears will start popping insanely. And if you've ever gone underwater really, really deep, you'll feel like that your ears are about to explode. That's the exact same feeling that you'll feel, except probably 100 times worse. So, without gravity, and therefore eventually no atmospheric pressure or water or all the essential things that we need, humanity won't be on Earth for a very long and would soon die out. And still, while it's still here, which it always will be, let's be grateful that gravity is still a thing.